Part 8. By quality, I mean that in virtue of which people are said to be such and such. Quality is a term that is used in many senses. One sort of quality, let us call habit or disposition. Habit differs from disposition in being more lasting and more firmly established. The various kinds of knowledge and of virtue are habits, for knowledge, even when acquired only in a moderate degree, is, it is agreed, abiding in its character and difficult to displace, unless some great mental upheaval takes place, through disease or any such cause. The virtues, also, such as justice, self-restraint, and so on, are not easily dislodged or dismissed, so as to give place to vice. By a disposition, on the other hand, we mean a condition that is easily changed and quickly gives place to its opposite. Thus, heat, cold, disease, health, and so on are dispositions. For a man is disposed in one way or another with reference to these, but quickly changes, becoming cold instead of warm, ill instead of well. So it is with all other dispositions also, unless through lapse of time, a disposition has itself become inveterate and almost impossible to dislodge, in which case we should perhaps go so far as to call it a habit. It is evident that men incline to call those conditions habits which are of a more or less permanent type, and difficult to displace. For those who are not retentive of knowledge, but volatile, are not said to have such, and such a habit as regards knowledge, yet they are disposed, we may say, either better or worse, towards knowledge. Thus habit differs from disposition in this, that while the latter is ephemeral, the former is permanent and difficult to alter. Habits are at the same time dispositions, but dispositions are not necessarily habits. For those who have some specific habit may be said also in virtue of that habit to be thus or thus disposed, but those who are disposed in some specific way have not in all cases the corresponding habit. Another sort of quality is that in virtue of which, for example, we call men good boxers, or runners, or healthy or sickly. In fact, it includes all those terms which refer to inborn capacity or incapacity. Such things are not predicated of a person in virtue of his disposition, but in virtue of his inborn capacity, or incapacity, to do something with ease, or to avoid defeat of any kind. Persons are called good boxers or good runners, not in virtue of such and such a disposition, but in virtue of an inborn capacity to accomplish something with ease. Men are called healthy in virtue of the inborn capacity of easy resistance to those unhealthy influences that may ordinarily arise, unhealthy in virtue of the lack of this capacity. Similarly, with regard to softness and hardness. Hardness is predicated of a thing because it has that capacity of resistance, which enables it to withstand disintegration. Softness, again, is predicated of a thing by reason of the lack of that capacity. A third class within this category is that of affective qualities and affections. Sweetness, bitterness, sourness are examples of this sort of quality. Together with all that is akin to these, heat, moreover, and cold, whiteness, and blackness are affective qualities. It is evident that these are qualities, for those things that possess them are themselves said to be such and such by reason of their presence. Honey is called sweet because it contains sweetness. The body is called white because it contains whiteness, and so in all other cases. The term affective quality is not used as indicating that those things which admit these qualities are affected in any way. Honey is not called sweet because it is affected in a specific way, nor is this what is meant in any other instance. Similarly, heat and cold are called affective qualities, not because those things which admit them are affected. What is meant in that these said qualities are capable of producing an affection in the way of perception. For sweetness has the power of affecting the sense of taste, heat that of touch, and so it is with the rest of these qualities. Whiteness and blackness, however, and the other colors, are not said to be affective qualities in this sense, but because they themselves are the results of an affection. It is plain that many changes of colors take place because of affections. When a man is ashamed, he blushes. When he is afraid, he becomes pale, and so on. So true is this that when a man is by nature liable to such affections, arising from some concomitance of elements in his constitution, it is a probable inference that he has the corresponding complexion of skin, for the same disposition of bodily elements, which in the former instance was momentarily present in the case of an access of shame, might be a result of a man's natural temperament. So it is as to produce the corresponding coloring also as a natural characteristic. All conditions, therefore, of this kind, if caused by certain permanent and lasting affections, are called affective qualities. For pallor and duskiness of complexion are called qualities, inasmuch as we are said to be such and such in virtue of them, not only if they originate in natural constitution, but also if they come about through long disease or sunburn, and are difficult to remove, or indeed remain throughout life. For in the same way we are said to be such and such because of these. Those conditions, however, which arise from causes which may easily be rendered ineffective or speedily removed, are called, not qualities, but affections. For we are not said to be such in virtue of them. The man who blushes through shame is not said to be a constitutional blusher, nor is the man who becomes pale through fear said to be constitutionally pale. He is said rather to have been affected. Thus such conditions are called affections, not qualities. In like manner, there are affective qualities and affections of the soul. That temper with which a man is born, and which has its origin in certain deep-seated affections, is called a quality. I mean such conditions as insanity, irascibility, and so on, for people are said to be mad or irascible in virtue of these. Similarly, those abnormal psychic states which are not inborn, but arise from the concomitance of certain other elements, and are difficult to remove, or altogether permanent, are called qualities. For in virtue of them men are said to be such and such. Those, however, which arise from causes easily rendered ineffective are called affections, not qualities. Suppose that a man is irritable when vexed. He is not even spoken of as a bad-tempered man, when in such circumstances he loses his temper somewhat, but rather is said to be affected. Such conditions are therefore termed not qualities, but affections. The fourth sort of quality is figure and the shape that belongs to a thing, and besides this, straightness and curvedness, and any other qualities of this type. Each of these defines a thing as being such and such. Because it is triangular or quadrangular, a thing is said to have a specific character, or again, because it is straight or curved. In fact, a thing's shape in every case gives rise to a qualification of it. Rarity and density, roughness and smoothness, seem to be terms indicating quality. Yet these, it would appear, really belong to a class different from that of quality. For it is rather a certain relative position of these parts composing the thing thus qualified which, it appears, is indicated by each of these terms. A thing is dense, owing to the fact that its parts are closely combined with one another, rare because there are interstices between the parts, smooth because its parts lie, so to speak, evenly, rough because some parts project beyond others. There may be other sorts of quality, but those that are most properly so called have, we may safely say, been enumerated. These, then, are qualities, and the things that take their name from them as derivatives, or are in some other way dependent on them, are said to be qualified in some specific way. In most, indeed in almost all cases, the name of that which is qualified is derived from that of the quality. Thus the term whiteness, grammar, justice give us the adjectives white, grammatical, just, and so on. There are some cases, however, in which the quality under consideration has no name. It is impossible that those possessed of it should have a name that is derivative. For instance, the name given to the runner or boxer, who is so called in virtue of an inborn capacity, is not derived from that of any quality, for both of those capacities have no name assigned to them. In this, the inborn capacity is distinct from the science, with reference to which men are called, exempla gratia, boxers or wrestlers. Such a science is classed as a disposition. It has a name, and is called boxing or wrestling, as the case may be. And the name given to those disposed in this way is derived from that of the science. Sometimes, even though a name exists for the quality, that which takes its character from the quality has a name that is not a derivative. For instance, the upright man takes his character from the possession of the quality of integrity. But the name given him is not derived from the word integrity. Yet this does not occur often. We may therefore state that those things are said to be possessed of some specific quality, which have a name derived from that of the aforesaid quality, or which are in some other way dependent on it. One quality may be the contrary of another. Thus, justice is the contrary of injustice, whiteness and blackness, and so on. These things also, which are said to be such and such in virtue of these qualities, may be contrary the one to the other. For that which is unjust is contrary to that which is just, and that which is white to that which is black. This, however, is not always the case. Red, yellow, and such colors, though qualities, have no contraries. If one of two contraries is a quality, the other will also be a quality. This will be evident from particular instances, if we apply the names used to denote the other categories. For instance, granted that justice is the contrary of injustice, and justice is a quality, injustice will also be a quality. Neither quantity, nor relation, nor place, nor indeed any other category, but that of quality, will be applicable properly to injustice. So it is with all other contraries falling under the category of quality. Qualities admit of variations of degree. Whiteness is predicated of one thing in a greater or lesser degree than of other. This is also the case with reference to justice. Moreover, one and the same thing may exhibit a quality in a greater degree than it did before. If a thing is white, it may become whiter. Though that is generally the case, there are exceptions. For if we should say that justice admitted of variation of degree, difficulties might ensue, and this is true with regard to all those qualities which are dispositions. There are some, indeed, who dispute the possibility of variation here. They maintain that justice and health cannot very well admit of variation of degree themselves, but that people vary in the degree in which they possess these qualities, and that this is the case with grammatical learning, and all those qualities which are classed as dispositions. However that may be, it is an incontrovertible fact that the things which in virtue of these qualities are said to be what they are vary in the degree in which they possess them. For one man is said to be better versed in grammar, or more healthy, or just than another, and so on. The qualities expressed by the terms triangular and quadrangular do not appear to admit of variation of degree, nor indeed do they have to do with figure, for those things to which the definition of the triangle or circle is applied are all equally triangular, or circular. Those, on the other hand, to which the same definition is not applicable, cannot be said to differ from one another in degree. The square is no more a circle than the rectangle, for to neither is the definition of the circle appropriate. In short, if the definition of the term proposed is not applicable to both objects, they cannot be compared. Thus it is not all qualities which admit of variation of degree. Whereas none of the characteristics I have mentioned are peculiar to quality, the fact that likeness and unlikeness can be predicated with reference to quality only gives to that category its distinctive feature. One thing is like another only with reference to that in virtue of which it is such and such. Thus this forms the peculiar mark of quality. We must not be disturbed because it may be argued that, though proposing to discuss the category of quality, we have included it in many relative terms. We did say that habits and dispositions were relative. In practically all cases, the genus is relative, the individual is not. Thus, knowledge, as a genus, is explained by reference to something else, where we mean a knowledge of something. But particular branches of knowledge are not thus explained. The knowledge of grammar is not relative to anything external, nor is the knowledge of music, but these, if relative at all, are relative only in virtue of their genre. Thus, grammar is said to be the knowledge of something, not the grammar of something. Similarly, music is the knowledge of something, not the music of something. Thus, individual branches of knowledge are not relative, and it is because we possess these individual branches of knowledge that we are said to be such and such. It is these that we actually possess. We are called experts because we possess knowledge in some particular branch. Those particular branches, therefore, of knowledge, in virtue of which we are sometimes said to be such and such, are themselves qualities, and are not relative. Further, if anything should happen to fall within both the category of quality and that of relation, there would be nothing extraordinary in classing it under both these heads. Section 3, Part 9. Action and affection both admit of contraries, and also of variation of degree. Heating is the contrary of cooling. Being heated of being cooled, being glad of being vexed. Thus they admit of contraries. They also admit of variation of degree, for it is possible to heat in a greater or lesser degree, also to be heated in a greater or less degree. Thus action and affection also admit of variation of degree. So much, then, is stated with regard to these categories. We spoke, moreover, of the category of position when we were dealing with that of relation, and stated that such terms derived their names from those of the corresponding attitudes. As for the rest, time, place, state, since they are easily intelligible, I say no more about them than was said at the beginning, that in the category of state are included such states as shod, armed, in that of place, in the Lyceum, and so on, as was explained before. Part 10. The proposed categories have, then, been adequately dealt with. We must next explain the various senses in which the term opposite is used. Things are said to be opposed in 4 senses. 1. As correlatives to one another. 2. As contraries to one another. 3. As privatives to positives. 4. As affirmatives to negatives. Let me sketch my meaning in outline. An instance of the use of the word opposite with reference to correlatives is afforded by the expressions double and half, with reference to contraries by bad and good. Opposites in the sense of privatives and positives are blindness and sight. In the sense of affirmatives and negatives, the propositions he sits, he does not sit. 1. Pairs of opposites which fall under the category of relation are explained by a reference of the one to the other, the reference being indicated by the preposition of or by some other preposition. Thus, double is a relative term, for that which is double is explained as the double of something. Knowledge, again, the opposite of the thing known, in the same sense, and the thing known also is explained by its relation to the opposite, knowledge. For the thing known is explained as that which is known by something, that is, by knowledge. Such things, then, as are opposite the one to the other in the sense of being correlatives, are explained by a reference of the one to the other. 2. Pairs of opposites which are contraries are not in any way interdependent, but are contrary the one to the other. The good is not spoken of as the good of the bad, but as the contrary of the bad. Nor is white spoken of as the white of the black, but as the contrary of the black. These two types of opposition are therefore distinct. Those contraries which are such that the subjects in which they are naturally present, or of which they are predicated, must necessarily contain either the one or the other of them, have no intermediate, but those in the case of which no such necessity obtains, always have an intermediate. Thus, disease and health are naturally present in the body of an animal, and it is necessary that either the one or the other should be present in the body of an animal. Odd and even, again, are predicated of number, and it is necessary that the one or the other should be present in numbers. Now there is no intermediate between the terms of either of these two pairs. On the other hand, in those contraries with regard to which no such necessity obtains, we find an intermediate. Blackness and whiteness are naturally present in the body, but it is not necessary that either the one or the other should be present in the body, inasmuch as it is not true to say that everybody must be white or black. Badness and goodness again are predicated of men, and of many other things. But it is not necessary that either the one quality or the other should be present in that of which they are predicated. It is not true to say that everything that may be good or bad must be either good or bad. These pairs of contraries have intermediates. The intermediates between white and black are gray, sallow, and all the other colors that come between. The intermediate between good and bad is that which is neither the one nor the other. Some intermediate qualities have names, such as gray and sallow, and all the other colors that come between white and black. In other cases, however, it is not easy to name the intermediate, but we must define it as that which is not either extreme, as in the case of that which is neither good nor bad, neither just nor unjust. 3. Privatives and positives have reference to the same subject. Thus, sight and blindness have reference to the eye. It is a universal rule that each of a pair of opposites of this type has reference to that which the particular positive is natural. We say that that is capable of some particular faculty or possession has suffered privation when the faculty or possession in question is in no way present in that in which and at the time at which it should naturally be present. We do not call that toothless, which has not teeth, or that blind, which has not sight, but rather that which has not teeth or sight at the time when by nature it should. For there are some creatures which from birth are without sight, or without teeth, but these are not called toothless or blind. To be without some faculty or to possess it is not the same as the corresponding privative or positive. Sight is a positive, blindness a privative, but to possess sight is not equivalent to sight. To be blind is not equivalent to blindness. Blindness is a privative. To be blind is to be in a state of privation, but is not a privative. Moreover, if blindness were equivalent to being blind, both would be predicated of the same subject. But though a man is said to be blind, he is by no means said to be blindness. To be in a state of possession is, it appears, the opposite of being in a state of privation, just as positives and privatives themselves are opposite. There is the same type of antithesis in both cases, for just as blindness is opposed to sight, so is being blind opposed to having sight. That which is affirmed or denied is not itself affirmation or denial. By affirmation, we mean an affirmative proposition. By denial, a negative. Now, those facts which form the matter of the affirmation or denial are not propositions, yet these two are said to be opposed in the same sense as the affirmation and denial. For in this case also the type of antithesis is the same. For as the affirmation is opposed to the denial, as in the two propositions, he sits, he does not sit. So also the fact which constitutes the matter of the proposition in one case is opposed to that in the other. His sitting, that is to say, to his not sitting. It is evident that positives and privatives are not opposed each to each in the same sense as relatives. The one is not explained in reference to the other. Sight is not sight of blindness, nor is any other preposition used to indicate the relation. Similarly, blindness is not said to be blindness of sight, but rather privation of sight. Relatives, moreover, reciprocate. If blindness, therefore, were a relative, there would be a reciprocity of relation between it and that with which it was correlative. But this is not the case. Sight is not called the sight of blindness. That those terms which fall under the heads of positives and privatives are not opposed each to each as contraries either, is plain from the following facts. Of a pair of contraries such that they have no intermediate, one or the other must needs be present in the subject in which they naturally subsist, or of which they are predicated. For it is those, as we proved, in the case of which this necessity obtains, that have no intermediate. Moreover, we cited health and disease, odd and even, as instances. But those contraries which have an intermediate are not subject to any such necessity. It is not necessary that every substance receptive of such qualities should be either black or white, cold or hot, for something intermediate between these contraries may very well be present in the subject. We proved, moreover, that those contraries have an intermediate in the case of which the said necessity does not obtain. Yet, when one of the two contraries is a constitutive property of the subject, as it is a constitutive property of fire to be hot, of snow to be white, it is necessary determinately that one of the two contraries, not one or the other, should be present in the subject. For fire cannot be cold, or snow black. Thus, it is not the case here that one of the two must needs be present in every subject receptive of these qualities, but only in that subject of which the one forms a constitutive property. Moreover, in such cases it is one member of the pair determinately, and not either the one or the other, which must be present. In the case of positives and privatives, on the other hand, neither of the aforesaid statements holds good, for it is not necessary that a subject receptive of the qualities should always have either the one or the other. That which has not yet advanced to the state where sight is natural is not said either to be blind or to see. Thus, positives and privatives do not belong to that class of contraries which consists of those which have no intermediate. On the other hand, they do not belong either to that class which consists of contraries which have an intermediate. For under certain conditions, it is necessary that either the one or the other should form part of the constitution of every appropriate subject. For when a thing has reached the stage when it is by nature capable of sight, it will be said either to see or to be blind, and that in an indeterminate sense, signifying that the capacity may be either present or absent. For it is not necessary either that it should see or that it should be blind, but that it should be either in the one state or in the other. Yet in the case of those contraries which have an intermediate, we found that it was never necessary that either the one or the other should be present in every appropriate subject, but only that in certain subjects one of the pairs should be present, and that in a determinate sense. Yet in the case of those contraries which have an intermediate, we found that it was never necessary that either the one or the other should be present in every appropriate subject, but only that in certain subjects one of the pairs should be present, and that in a determinate sense. It is therefore plain that positives and privatives are not opposed each to each in either of the senses in which contraries are opposed. Again, in the case of contraries, it is possible that there should be changes from either into the other, while the subject retains its identity, unless indeed one of the contraries is a constitutive property of that subject, as heat is of fire. For it is possible that that which is healthy should become diseased, that which is white, black, that which is cold, hot, that which is good, bad, that which is bad, good. The bad man, if he is being brought into a better way of life and thought, may make some advance, however slight, and if he should once improve, even ever so little, it is plain that he might change completely, or at any rate make very great progress. For a man becomes more and more easily moved to virtue, however small the improvement was at first. It is therefore natural to suppose that he will make yet greater progress than he has made in the past, and as this process goes on, it will change him completely and establish him in the contrary sense, provided he is not hindered by lack of time. In the case of positives and privatives, however, change in both directions is possible. There may be a change from possession to privation, but not from privation to possession. The man who has become blind does not regain his sight. The man who has become bald does not regain his hair. The man who has lost his teeth does not grow a new set. 4. Statements opposed as affirmation and negation belong manifestly to a class which is distinct, for in this case, and in this case only, it is necessary for the one opposite to be true and the other false. Neither in the case of contraries, nor in the case of correlatives, nor in the case of positives and privatives, is it necessary for one to be true and the other false. Health and disease are contraries. Neither of them is true or false. Double and half are opposed to each other as correlatives. Neither of them is true or false. The case is the same, of course, with regards to positives and privatives, such as sight and blindness. In short, where there is no sort of combination of words, truth and falsity have no place, and all the opposites we have mentioned so far consist of simple words. At the same time, when the words which enter into opposed statements are contraries, these, more than any other set of opposites, would seem to claim this characteristic. Socrates is ill is the contrary of Socrates is well. But not even of such composite expressions is it true to say that one of the pair must always be true and the other false. For if Socrates exists, one will be true and the other false. But if he does not exist, both will be false. For neither Socrates is ill, nor Socrates is well, is true, if Socrates does not exist at all. In the case of positives and privatives, if the subject does not exist at all, neither proposition is true. But even if the subject exists, it is not always the fact that one is true and the other false. For Socrates has sight is the opposite of Socrates is blind, in the sense of the word opposite, which applies to possession and privation. Now, if Socrates exists, it is not necessary that one should be true and the other false, for when he is not yet able to acquire the power of vision, both are false, as also if Socrates is altogether non-existent. But in the case of affirmation and negation, whether the subject exists or not, one is always false and the other true. For manifestly, if Socrates exists, one of the two propositions, Socrates is ill, Socrates is not ill, is true, and the other false. This is likewise the case if he does not exist, for if he does not exist, to say that he is ill is false, to say that he is not ill is true. Thus it is in the case of those opposites only, which are opposite in the sense in which the term is used with reference to affirmation and negation, that the rule holds good, that one of the pair must be true, and the other false. Part 11. But the contrary of an evil is sometimes a good, sometimes an evil. For defect, which is an evil, has excess for its contrary, this also being an evil, and the mean, which is a good, is equally the contrary of the one and of the other. It is only in a few cases, however, that we see instances of this. In most, the contrary of an evil is a good. In the case of contraries, it is not always necessary that if one exists, the other should also exist. For if all become healthy, there will be health and no disease. And again, if everything turns white, there will be white but no black. Again, since the fact that Socrates is ill is the contrary of the fact that Socrates is well, and two contradictory conditions cannot both obtain in one and the same individual at the same time, both these contraries could not exist at once. For if that Socrates was well was a fact, then that Socrates was ill could not possibly be one. It is plain that contrary attributes must needs be present in subjects which belong to the same species or genus. Disease and health require as their subject the body of an animal. White and black require a body, without further qualification. Justice and injustice require as their subject the human soul. Moreover, it is necessary that pairs of contraries should in all cases either belong to the same genus or belong to contrary genera, or be themselves genera. White and black belong to the same genus, color, justice and injustice to contrary genera, virtue and vice, while good and evil do not belong to genera, but are themselves actual genera, with terms under them. Part 12. There are four senses in which one thing can be said to be prior to another. Primarily and most properly, the term has reference to time. In this sense of the word is used to indicate that one thing is older or more ancient than another. For the expressions older and more ancient imply greater length of time. Secondly, one thing is said to be prior to another when the sequence of their being cannot be reversed. In this sense, one is prior to two, for if two exists, it follows directly that one must exist. But if one exists, it does not follow necessarily that two exists. Thus, the sequence subsisting cannot be reversed. It is agreed, then, that when the sequence of two things cannot be reversed, then that one on which the other depends is called prior to that other. In the third place, the term prior is used with reference to any order, as in the case of science and of oratory. For in sciences which use demonstration, and that which is posterior in order. In geometry, the elements are prior to the propositions. In reading and writing, the letters of the alphabet are prior to the syllables. Similarly, in the case of speeches, the exordium is prior in order to the narrative. Besides these senses of the word, there is a fourth. That which is better and more honorable is said to have a natural priority. In common parlance, men speak of those whom they honor and love as coming first with them. This sense of the word is perhaps the most far-fetched. Such, then, are the different senses in which the term prior is used. Yet it would seem that besides those mentioned here, there is yet another. For in those things, the being of each which implies that of the other, that which is in any way the cause may reasonably be said to be by nature prior to the effect. It is plain that there are instances of this. The fact of the being of a man carries with it the truth of the proposition that he is, and the implication is reciprocal. For if a man is, the proposition wherein we allege that he is true, and conversely, if the proposition wherein we allege that he is true, then he is. The true proposition, however, is in no way the cause of the being of the man, but the fact of the man's being does seem somehow to be the cause of the truth of the proposition, for the truth or falsity of the proposition depends on the fact of the man's being or not being. Thus, the word prior may be used in 5 senses. Part 13. The term simultaneous is primarily and most appropriately applied to those things, the genesis of the one of which is simultaneous with that of the other. For in such cases, neither is prior or posterior to the other. Such things are said to be simultaneous in point of time. Those things again are simultaneous in point of nature, the being of each of which involves that of the other, while at the same time neither is the cause of the other's being. This is the case with regards to the double and the half, for these are reciprocally dependent, since if there is a double, there is also a half, and if there is a half, there is also a double, while at the same time neither is the case of the being of the other. Again, those species which are distinguished one from another and opposed to another within the same genus are said to be simultaneous in nature. I mean those species which are distinguished each from each by one and the same method of division. Thus the winged species is simultaneous with the terrestrial and the water species. These are distinguished within the same genus, and are opposed each to each, for the genus animal has the winged, the terrestrial, and the water species, and no one of these is prior or posterior to another. On the contrary, all such things appear to be simultaneous in nature. Each of these also, the terrestrial, the winged, and the water species, can be divided again into subspecies. Those species, then, will also be simultaneous in point of nature, which, belonging to the same genus, are distinguished each from each by one and the same method of differentiation. But genera are prior to species, for the sequence of their being cannot be reversed. If there is the species water animal, there will be the genus animal. But granted the being of the genus animal, it does not follow necessarily that there will be the species water animal. Those things, therefore, are said to be simultaneous in nature, the being of each which involves that of the other, while at the same time neither is in any way the cause of the other's being. Those species also which are distinguished each from each and opposed within the same genus. Those things, moreover, are simultaneous in the unqualified sense of the word, which come into being at the same time. Part 14. There are 6 sorts of movement: generation, destruction, increase, diminution, alteration, and change of place. It is evident in all but one case that all of these sorts of movement are distinct each from each. Generation is distinct from destruction, increase and change of place from diminution, and so on. But in the case of alteration, it may be argued that the process necessarily implies one or other of the other 5 sorts of motion. This is not true, for we may say that all affections, or nearly all, produce in us an alteration which is distinct from all other sorts of motion, for that which is affected need not suffer either increase or diminution or any other sorts of motion. Thus, alteration is a distinct sort of motion, for, if it were not, the thing altered would not only be altered, but would forthwith necessarily suffer increase or diminution, or some one of the other sorts of motion in addition, which as a matter of fact is not the case. Similarly, that which was undergoing the process of increase, or was subject to some other sort of motion, would, if alteration were not a distinct form of motion, necessarily be subject to alteration also. But there are some things which undergo increase, but yet not alteration. The square, for instance, if a gnomon is applied to it, undergoes increase, but not alteration, and so it is with all other figures of this sort. Alteration and increase, therefore, are distinct. Speaking generally, rest is the contrary of motion, but the different forms of motions have their own contraries in other forms. Thus destruction is the contrary of generation, diminution of rest in a place of change of place. As for this last, change in the reverse direction would not seem to be most truly its contrary. As for the last, change in the reverse direction would seem to be most truly its contrary. Thus, motion upwards is the contrary of motion downwards, and vice versa. In the case of that sort of motion which yet remains, of those that have been enumerated, it is not easy to say what is its contrary. It appears to have no contrary, unless one should define the contrary here also either as rest in its quality, or as change in the direction of the contrary quality, just as we defined the contrary of change of place, either as rest in a place, or as change in the reverse direction. For if a thing is altered when change of its quality takes place, therefore either rest in its quality or change in the direction of the contrary may be called the contrary of this qualitative form of motion. In this way, becoming white is the contrary of becoming black. There is alteration in the contrary direction, since a change of a qualitative nature takes place. Part 15. The term to have is used in various senses. In the first place, it is used with reference to habit or disposition, or any other quality, for we are said to have a piece of knowledge or a virtue. Then, again, it has reference to quantity, as, for instance, in the case of a man's height, for he is said to have a height of 3 or 4 cubits. It is used, moreover, with regard to apparel, a man being said to have a coat or tunic, or in respect of something which we have on a part of ourselves, as a ring on the hand, or in respect of something which is a part of us, as hand or foot. The term refers also to content, as in the case of a vessel and wheat, or of a jar and wine. A jar is said to have wine, and a corn measure, wheat. The expression in such cases has reference to content, or it refers to that which has been acquired. We are said to have a house or a field. A man is also said to have a wife, and a wife a husband. And this appears to be the most remote meaning of the term, for by the use of it we mean simply that the husband lives with the wife. Other senses of the word might perhaps be found, but the most ordinary ones have all been enumerated. So, as ever, I thank anybody who is watching the live recording in the coming days for their attendance and their, well, if not patronage of monetary assets, at least their patronage of their time and their attention. If you enjoyed any of this, I invite you most thoroughly to at least share it around. Let other people know. Let them see what you seem to appreciate in your own time, and the value that it might deliver unto your perspective around. We have, of course, the YouTube channel. BitChute is coming up. TikTok is coming up. We have Instagram, X, or Twitter, whichever you prefer, and other platforms soon, I'm sure. There is on Discord the Threefold Edifactory if you'd like to help me start in founding this community that I am hoping to build up, where we all share and talk and examine and do all the kinds of things that we like to do together as a community. One that is founded on the basis of expressing what there is to be expressed out of this world and what might lie beyond it in the fictitious worlds that we put together. If you think that it might be worth a little bit more to you than just your attention, and maybe even sharing it around and getting it into the attention of others, there is always Stream Elements if you wish to make a one-time donation. That is linked in the description and on the channel. If you want to do something a little bit more recurrent, we have Patreon, starting at $5 a month with the Proponent tier. You get all sorts of nice little goodies, like the ability to view all of my content that I put out ad-free, as well as participation in voting on any polls that I might have. Maybe I want to determine what game, a book, or other material that I'm looking to review. Perhaps I'll even get into film sometime here soon. But otherwise, you will also be able to have your names here at the end of the stream, in the credits, for those who are willing to put forth a little bit of their money to help me keep the lights on and maybe eventually make this my career some sunshiny day. And outside of that, there are also tiers in the Discord server for each of the Pro, X, and Ultraponent level for those who want to talk amongst themselves as such. But overall, I hope you never miss your opportunities. Until the next time.